The restaurant industry is a meat grinder. It takes your weekends, your holidays, and your youth. You don't do it for the money. You do it because it's in your blood. For 10 years, I bled for my dream. And just when I finally built an empire, the woman I loved tried to steal it from right under my nose. My name's Ethan. I'm 35, and I'm an executive chef. 5 years ago, my wife Sarah and I finally opened our own place, a high-end, wood-fired steak and seafood restaurant. It was a true partnership. I was the back-of-house wizard. I created the menu, trained the kitchen staff, and worked 80-hour weeks over a hot grill. Sarah was the front-of-house stace. She managed the hostesses, handled the marketing, and most importantly, controlled the books. To get the doors open, we brought in an outside investor, a guy named Richard. Richard owned a few car dealerships in town. He put up the capital, took a 30% silent partner stake, and let us run the show. Within 3 years, the restaurant was a massive hit. We had a 2-month waiting list. We were making incredible money. I thought Sarah and I were untouchable. I thought we had conquered the world together. But the thing about success is, it exposes who people really are. And Sarah wasn't a partner. She was a parasite.
The shift happened when we started talking about opening a second location. Suddenly, Richard went from being a silent partner to being in the restaurant every single day. He and Sarah started having endless strategy meetings in the back office. Whenever I walked in with a plate of new food for them to try, the conversation would instantly stop. Richard would awkwardly adjust his tie, and Sarah would look at her phone. Then, the red flags started burning my eyes. First, Sarah's lifestyle exploded. She started driving a brand new Range Rover. When I asked how we could afford it, she claimed she leased it through the business as a tax write-off. She started wearing Rolex watches and designer clothes to work. I was still wearing my flour-stained chef pants and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Second, the kitchen budget was getting slashed. We were fully booked every night, but Sarah kept telling me our margins were too tight. She told me I had to use cheaper cuts of meat and fire 2 of my prep cooks. It made 0 sense. We were grossing $200,000 a month. Where was the money going? Third, the intimacy died. Sarah moved into the guest bedroom, claiming the smell of smoke and garlic on my skin was making her nauseous. We went from being husband and wife to being hostile roommates. I was exhausted. I was running on 4 hours of sleep a night. But one Tuesday, the restaurant was closed, and I went in alone to deep clean the walk-in freezer. That's when the house of cards collapsed. I needed to check an invoice from our meat supplier, so I went into Sarah's office. Her laptop was on her desk. She always locked it, but she had a bad habit of keeping her Apple Messages synced to the restaurant's main office iPad, which was sitting right next to it. I tapped the iPad screen to wake it up. A message from Richard was right there on the lock screen. "Can't wait for tonight, baby. We are so close to getting rid of the chef." I froze. My heart felt like it stopped beating. I unlocked the iPad and opened the thread. I didn't just find an affair. I found a corporate assassination plot. Sarah and Richard had been sleeping together for over a year, but it was much worse than infidelity. They were embezzling. Sarah was artificially inflating our expense reports and funneling tens of thousands of dollars into a dummy LLC that she and Richard controlled. That's how she bought the Range Rover. But the final nail in the coffin was their ultimate plan. Because they were faking the restaurant's financial distress, they planned to trigger a clause in our operating agreement. Richard was going to demand a buyout of his investment due to poor performance. Since the restaurant supposedly had no cash, Sarah was going to convince me to sign over my ownership shares to Richard to settle the debt.
I found a text from Sarah. Once Ethan signs the equity over, we fire him. We keep his menu, keep his staff, and we own 100% of a gold mine. He's too tired to fight back anyway. I sat in the dark office, surrounded by the restaurant I built with my bare hands, realizing my wife and my investor were plotting to steal my life's work.
In a commercial kitchen, if a fire breaks out, you don't panic. You cut off the oxygen, you grab the extinguisher, and you neutralize the threat. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't smash anything. I took out my phone and took pictures of every single message on that iPad. I found the hidden folders with the fake invoices and the bank transfers to their dummy LLC. I forwarded everything to a secure email address. When I went home that night, Sarah asked me why I looked so tired. "Just a long day in the kitchen, honey," I said, giving her a weak smile. "You know I'd do anything for this place, for us." For the next 2 months, I played the ultimate fool. I let her think she was the smartest person in the room. I agreed when she said we needed to cut costs. I acted stressed about the failing finances. But while they were busy planning my exit, I was busy building my empire across town. I met with a forensic accountant and a ruthless business attorney. The accountant looked at the files I took and whistled. "This isn't just divorce material, Ethan," he said. "This is felony wire fraud and tax evasion. They are stealing from the IRS." I smiled. Good. Let them.
My lawyer reviewed my original operating agreement. Sarah and Richard had made a fatal error. They owned the LLC, the lease, and the furniture, but they never made me sign an intellectual property clause. The name of the restaurant, the exact recipes, the signature sauces, they belonged to me. Legally, they were my personal intellectual property. I quietly secured a loan from a private backer who loved my food. I signed a lease on a massive, beautiful, abandoned restaurant space just 3 miles away. Under the cover of darkness, I started outfitting it. Then I did the most important thing. I gathered my kitchen staff, my sous chef, my line cooks, my dishwashers. These were guys I had bled with. I took them out for beers after a Saturday shift and told them everything. I told them Sarah was planning to fire them all and bring in cheap labor once I was gone. I slid a stack of contracts across the table. "I'm opening a new place," I told them. "I'm offering you all a 20% pay raise, full benefits, and better hours, but you have to keep your mouths shut until the day I say go." Every single one of them signed. They hated Sarah anyway. Meanwhile, back at the old restaurant, the trap was set. Sarah came to me with fake tears in her eyes. "Ethan, the numbers are terrible," she cried. "Richard is threatening to sue us if we don't buy him out. He said he'll forgive the debt if you sign over your 35% equity. We have no choice." I put my head in my hands, acting defeated. "Okay," I whispered. "Draw up the papers."
We met at a lawyer's office on a Monday morning. Sarah and Richard were practically vibrating with excitement. They thought they had just pulled off the heist of the century. I read through the document. It relinquished my ownership in the LLC. I picked up the pen, looked Sarah in the eye, and signed my name. Richard smirked. "It's just business, Ethan. You're a great cook, but you're not a businessman." "You're right, Richard," I said, standing up. "I'm a chef." I walked out of the office. I immediately sent a group text to my entire kitchen staff. Code red, go. At that exact moment, 2 things happened. First, a moving truck pulled up to the back alley of the old restaurant. My sous chef and my crew systematically emptied the kitchen of every single custom spice blend, every recipe book, and every piece of specialized equipment I personally owned. They stripped it to the bone. Second, I hit send on an email to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. It contained 400 pages of bank records, fake invoices, and text messages explicitly detailing how Sarah and Richard were defrauding the government and evading taxes. Then I drove to my new restaurant, turned on the lights, and started prepping for opening night.
The smoke is clearing. Let the karma of this situation really land. Sarah and Richard walked into their newly stolen restaurant at 4 p.m. to prepare for dinner service. They walked into a ghost town. There was no staff. The walk-in coolers were locked. The recipe books were gone. The prep stations were completely empty. My phone started ringing. It was Sarah. I answered and put it on speakerphone. "Ethan, where is everybody? Where is the food? We have 200 reservations tonight," she screamed. "You own the LLC, Sarah," I said calmly, "but you don't own my recipes, and you don't own my people. I suggest you put on an apron and start cooking. Good luck." I hung up and blocked her. They had to cancel every reservation. They had to shut the doors. A restaurant without a chef and a staff is just an expensive room with tables. But that was just the appetizer. 2 weeks later, the main course arrived. Federal agents from the IRS raided the restaurant and Richard's car dealerships simultaneously. They seized all the hard drives and froze all their bank accounts, including the dummy LLC they used to steal from me. Because I was no longer an owner of the company, and because I was the whistleblower who provided the evidence, I was granted immunity from the investigation. I sat back and watched the fireworks.
It's been 2 years since I walked out of that lawyer's office. My new restaurant, the Phoenix, is the hardest reservation to get in the city. My staff is happy, I make more money than I ever thought possible, and the food has never been better. As for Sarah and Richard, their grand master plan ended in absolute disaster. Richard was indicted for tax evasion and wire fraud. To save himself, he turned on Sarah, claiming she was the mastermind who cooked the books. Sarah tried to throw him under the bus. They lost everything in legal fees. The original restaurant went bankrupt and was sold for parts. Last I heard, Sarah pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of fraud and is serving 3 years of probation, working as a cashier at a grocery store because no one in the city will hire her for accounting. If there is a lesson here, it's this. Never underestimate the person working in the background. The loudest person in the room isn't usually the smartest. If your partner betrays you, don't let anger ruin your focus. Let them think they're winning. Let them take the wheel. And just before they cross the finish line, take the engine out of the car. Thanks for listening, guys. If you like this story, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, what's your favorite dish to cook? Stay safe and protect your craft.